And hello again. My name is Daniel Kirsch, and welcome to this very brief lecture on presidents and the media and the politics surrounding those things. I wanted to focus today on what some of the aspects of your textbook discuss in terms of the presidents and their interactions with the media. But there's several different aspects that can take you in a lot of different research directions as far as the media is concerned. Do we deal with the president more as a creator of media or as a beneficiary of media, perhaps, or both? Do we see the president as an object of study by the media, or do we see the president as a shaper of media, the structure of media, or president merely a cog in the machine of that media structure that we already know? So the answer to all of this is yes. The answer to all of those questions are yes. Of course, the president is all of those things, and the presidency is all of those things. But it certainly has not evolved from nowhere to be this 24-hour news cycle as we know it. It's taken a slow progression, and I'm only here today in this 25-minute lecture to bring you up to speed about maybe some of the aspects that led us here, and certainly not a comprehensive kind of definition of what the media even is, let alone what the president's role within the media machine can be. But you'll pardon my kind of slanted handwriting here. I'm just trying to get some shorthand notes that I think will help clarify the points I'm trying to make. So your textbook opens the chapter on the media talking about some of the contrast between the way President Obama and President Trump interacted with the media. And President Obama was known, and is known still, I think, as being a pop culture president. He would go on various news programs, but also entertainment programs before and he was president, and after, of course, he was president, and do things like slow jam the news with Jimmy Fallon, or appear in a skit on Saturday Night Live, dress as himself for Halloween, or this other thing that was very pointed. It was part of the publicity campaign for the Affordable Care Act that he had taken so long to pass in 2009 and 10. It was an effort to get younger people to register for health care and purchase health care through the new exchanges in the Affordable Care Act. And he appeared on this comedy talk show on the internet with Zach Galifianakis. And he has good comic timing. It was funny, and if you haven't seen it, you should. Just as a sort of reference about what they're even talking about in this book. But it was 10 years ago, so I realize many of you haven't seen it. But in it, he does this kind of back and forth with the host, with Zach Galifianakis, and President Obama is trying to relate to younger folks to get them to sign up for healthcare through these new healthcare exchanges, because he's trying to expand the pool of people who are insured in order to get everyone's healthcare premiums down, and also to make sure that the new policy works in the sense that people sign up for the service and it does all of the things that it's supposed to do. So this outreach was for a very definitive policy reason, and so he used the media as simply a tool for basically this public initiative, a campaign, if you will, to try to get people signed up for the Affordable Care Act. And I'm not sure. I mean, ultimately it was somewhat successful, but it was really, as I think I've said before, I think it's fair to say that the Affordable Care Act kind of nibbled at the edges of the existing system. It didn't really create a new system, but it was the largest expansion of certainly government-sponsored healthcare since the Johnson administration. And so, using all of these kind of pop culture avenues to relate to younger folks and also older folks, with various strategically placed media appearances, in addition to, holding normal presidential things like press conferences, or simply doing a joint address to Congress or the State of the Union. So Barack Obama is comparatively one of the 3 or 4 youngest presidents we've had. And so it's fair to say that he was maybe more energetic than most presidents have been in trying to get ahead of the media strategy, to reach to as many different aspects, by age anyway, of the media market as possible to expand his appeal and his administration's appeal. And yet, his chosen successor, Hillary Clinton, did not end up winning election to what would have been called a third Obama term. Instead, we had someone who sought to repudiate his legacy, and that is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump had as much of a polar opposite, persona in the media as Obama did. No less powerful, and certainly no less distinctive, inasmuch as President Obama was the pop culture president who gained kind of cultural and political currency for himself, in referencing another lecture I've done today about public opinion, and he certainly tried to do the work of increasing the popularity of his administration in order to keep up the power of his administration and increase the power of the political oomph of his administration and leverage, simply by attempting to amp up the approval ratings of his presidency. Inasmuch as he tried to do that, in a way, Donald Trump was from just a different vantage point in the cultural landscape, because he had an established, really celebrity persona within the media that he was seeking to expand by way of being president, or at least he built upon to win the presidency and then continue really after he was in office as president, and what was more unprecedented of what Trump did is that he maintained his existing Twitter handle all through his presidency, and it was one that he had first gained access to. I'm not sure when, but it was at least preceding 2012 and 2013. When he was beginning to actively criticize the Obama administration in a regular way on Twitter, as I understand it. I was on Twitter, I'm not anymore. I used to follow, I never did follow President Trump, to be honest, because, well, for one thing, everyone else would retweet him anyway. So you never, and plus they would report all of his tweets. And so the media, saw Twitter as this, and rightly so, as this way that, to again use a public opinion reference, President Trump would go public and appeal directly to not necessarily all of the people, but just his base of support, and in attempting to shore up his kind of identification with them, and demonstrate that he was attempting to act on their behalf, or that they should act on his. This Twitter and his tweets were one of the reasons why Twitter expanded from 140 to 280 characters, was so that he could more effectively use it as he and perhaps others like him could use it more effectively as a platform. But in the wake of the Capitol, insurrection, of course, he was, his Twitter account was revoked. So let me just continue and say that he was someone who, and still is someone, of course, who has thrived on building upon his own persona, and in doing that, he has been able to cultivate a base that is increasingly that has been increasingly identified with his interests. And so that's kind of a new model of presidential leadership. Is this he is approved of his own channel of communication with his voters, but then also his the knowledge that he had of programs that had been on Fox News was also unprecedented. So it was well known that he watched Fox News on a regular basis, and in fact would call in to Fox and Friends, their morning show, on a pretty regular basis. And so so all of the newscasters and then certainly opinion oriented journalists on Fox News were routinely giving praise to not only Trump but also his whatever policies that he decided to highlight on Twitter that day. So he was increasingly identified with one particular news outlet, and again in I can't say it enough times because it's true, in an unprecedented way, he attempted to vilify virtually every other news outlet out there, and from CNN and the New York Times, he called the New York Times was the failing New York Times. CNN was fake news. Everyone else was fake news, and everyone else that didn't agree with him or paint what he considered to be an accurate picture was fake news. And he would do things like try to revoke their press credentials, or in one instance during a press conference, it was very theatrical, got an intern or an aide to try to take the microphone away from a CNN reporter when he was asking questions during a press conference. And finally, I guess I've kind of opened a little bit of a train of thought here. One way that Trump avoided interacting with the media directly during his administration was that he simply did not order his press secretary to have daily or even weekly press conferences. Sometimes it went as many as 4 months without a press conference. And the only time they had to ask questions of either the president or the press secretary, which we'll talk about soon, is during the moments that he was about to get on Marine One, on the helicopter that takes the president around usually the East Coast of the U.S. And so these helicopter wing press conferences became a regular occurrence where they would seek to get questions answered, and I don't know, it definitely created, and I think purposefully, you have to say it was purposeful because he did it repeatedly, it created an atmosphere that was sort of a heightened state of tension between the president and the press, and it was very difficult for him to hear questions. I'm sure that was true, but that was an atmosphere that he was creating. So anyway, President Trump was vilifying people, and by the way, fake news is a whole other discussion that I can talk about more in a media class, but suffice to say that fake news is sort of ironic because there was a lot of actual fake news that was created for kind of profit during the 2016 presidential campaign of President Trump, both throughout the U.S. but also in parts of Europe and Asia, just from around the world. People were creating kind of anti-Hillary Clinton, for the most part, fake news montages and misinformation, and certainly it's it was spread through social media and notably Facebook, but President Trump did benefit from that, but he chose to use that label fake news in a totally different way by labeling mainstream outlets as fake news. Okay. But we're a long way off from that kind of personal appeal that many presidents have tried to engender with the American public. And I think the book does a good job of highlighting two particular presidents, both named Roosevelt. They both came from, by the way, different branches of the same family, but they were they had a common ancestor, but it was something like 6 generations removed. So, one grew up on New York City and upstate New York, and that was Franklin Roosevelt, and Theodore Roosevelt's family was largely on Long Island, so they were sort of separated by just the geography of New York. But anyway, so they were distantly related, and ultimately Franklin, by the way, married Theodore Roosevelt's niece, Eleanor Roosevelt, who didn't have to get a new last name, but she was, so she was a Roosevelt, but she was not really closely at all. She was like a 6th cousin of Franklin Roosevelt. Anyway, Theodore Roosevelt liked to appeal to the people through his speeches, and he knew how to give a speech. And in fact, he gave a speech coming back from safari in 1912. By one of the things he did was give a speech where he had to continue after being shot in the chest. And so he did, and he continued, and it was very effective, but he ultimately didn't win the presidency that year. But he did beat the Republican nominee after he founded his own party. So that was Theodore Roosevelt's very sort of outsized, gregarious persona. But he did this by making speeches that were hours long. Franklin Roosevelt did not make hours-long speeches, perhaps due to his kind of weakened state as being, with his physical condition after having suffered polio. But he seemed relatively vigorous in most ways. It just, there was not the appetite anymore for hours-long speeches now that there was transatlantic cable wire and there was radio. And there began to be television in the later parts of his administration. But the radio is where Franklin Roosevelt shined because he pioneered something he called the fireside chat. And these began during the early part of his administration, where he had his own radio hour to talk about directly with people in their living rooms, to talk about the new policies that he was planning to try to save the American economy. And he used this medium to as much of an extent as he could. And when television came along, he and his administration made sure that the media had access to the congressional chamber where he made his State of the Union addresses. And the age of television, further catapulted presidents into Americans' living rooms where they could appeal directly to them instead of having to be mediated by the media. And the media, they would defend themselves by probably saying that they are merely a reflection of, what the American public wants to read and see. However, the media is, you can't ignore the fact that there's been such an unbelievable exponential consolidation and series of mergers that have made the news media that the U.S. has consumed in the past go from hundreds of owners, literally hundreds of owners of different companies, and even, I think, 87 companies in the early 1980s, to six companies. Comcast, Viacom, Disney, Time Warner, AT&T now bought Time Warner, and 2 others that I always forget. But that's it. Google is not a content creator. Amazon is not a predominantly content creator. Facebook is not a content creator. They are content distributors. The people who create the content that is, that even owns newspapers and radio, 6 companies. And this is not just the news. This is television and movies. These are media conglomerates that are, and I hate to use this word again, unprecedented in history. So we have this media landscape that's merely, different organs of the same conglomerate have several seats in the White House press room. And so usually CNN, which is owned by AT&T, and Fox News, owned by News Corp, I believe that's one of the other 5, and ABC owned by Disney, are all, competing for time. But so are these newspapers, which are increasingly also owned, by some of these larger corporations. So 90% of what we read, see, and listen to are produced by only 6 media conglomerates. And so press secretaries have to sort of contend with this, and I urge you to read the section on press secretaries and their sort of ethics about how they are gatekeepers to the president and how much they actually have to lie to the White House press corps. And some of these names there are too many to go through right now, but the current White House press secretary is Jen Psaki, and she's apparently enjoying kind of a moment of fame right now during the Biden administration. And but these former press secretaries, like Jim Brady, who was shot when President Reagan had an assassination attempt, and later became a gun control advocate, who he remained press secretary for the duration of the Reagan administration after being shot, but never held another press conference himself again. And then later on, he ended up founding the Brady campaign to end gun violence with his wife. And both of them appeared at the 1996 Democratic National Convention to urge, gun control. So they're not political people at the time, except that they, in terms of public personas, they're usually either ex-journalists, or they're taking a stint in politics, or they're a public relations professional within the campaign team. That's usually who gets to be the White House press secretary, at least initially when the term begins. And that certainly is true of Jen Psaki. Pierre Salinger also, and Ron Ziegler, who was the kind of Watergate press secretary, maybe the worst job in history. And Mike McCurry, maybe the second worst job in history, because he was President Clinton's press secretary during the whole, sex scandal. And Matt Drudge is the person who broke this story, and he broke the whole, president affair, perjury scandal story in early 1998 on the internet. And he was seen as the kind of new model of journalist, but it turns out his website hasn't changed in 20 years. And Twitter and social media seems to have taken over the whole content distribution model, rather than just a page of links and a few catchy headlines like Matt Drudge would have. But anyway, so I would urge you to read that portion of the textbook, and just to say that I'm running a little bit out of time here, but just to say that the White House communications structure is ultimately dependent on a couple of things. One is the media landscape that they are attempting to relate to and contend with, but another is the kind of campaign dynamic they grew up in and are having to graft onto the White House. So they need to have a coherent communication strategy that includes a press secretary and speechwriters, and they have to be able to distribute that strategy and sort of disseminate that message through not only intermittent press conferences, as is traditional, and the State of the Union, of course, but also a 24/7 news cycle that is devoted to constant investigation of whatever the president and the White House is doing, with an eye towards the next election. And this horse race coverage that the media has is something that is really one of the main sources of critique by media critics of the way that the media operates. And so it makes it very difficult to even have questions about policy that are not sort of loaded as political questions. And so helps create the kind of adversarial environment wherein a President Trump can just openly despise and seek to discredit the news that is being reported in real time. So so this is kind of the mess of the media landscape that we see today. And the president plays multiple roles, as I mentioned. And one thing that I want make sure that I do mention is this whole media consolidation was facilitated by two public policy decisions by Presidents Reagan and Clinton to deregulate the media in terms of its ownership and consolidation prohibitions that did exist before. And now, and they were to ostensibly to ensure competition and free speech and kind of letting 1,000 flowers bloom, right? But instead, now we have these kind of very monolithic places where we get very, very few divergent opinions, despite what the kind of ownership of those conglomerates likes to portray. So in any event, the White House is increasingly embattled on several fronts because they're trying to shape and be shaped by and reap the benefits of a media landscape that may or may not be hostile to them, but certainly is not even depending on partisanship, seeking to profit most by either a popular president or an extremely unpopular president. A moderately popular president is pretty boring, so I think they like to inflate or deflate, as the case may be. Okay, let me know your questions, and I look forward to talking with you in class. Thanks for watching.